Across the rest of the world, Christmas is synonymous with peace, tranquility, beautiful gifts, and delicious food. But if you live in Britain, or if you have ever had the misfortune of witnessing a British Christmas firsthand, you will know that the reality here is starkly different. In the UK, Christmas is not so much a holiday as it is a national endurance test, a day where we willingly become slaves to our own bizarre and frankly bonkers traditions that make absolutely no sense to anyone looking in from the outside. We are a people who set our desserts on fire, we are a people who traumatize our children with boiled vegetables, and we are a people who, in order to celebrate the birth of a savior, sit down to dinner wearing flimsy paper crowns that make us look like clinically depressed monarchs. Today, we are going to dive deep into the British traditions that look like absolute madness to the outside world. But for us, especially those raised in the golden era of the 1960s, these are the very things that make a house feel like a home. Our story begins with an object found in almost every British household, an object that is responsible for the very first trust issue developed by every British child, and that is the biscuit tin. If you go into any nan's house, any auntie's living room, or indeed any home that has survived since the mid-20th century, you will see it sitting there on the sideboard, usually a shiny blue Royal Dansk Danish butter cookie tin. You spot it from across the room, your mouth starts to water, you fantasize about the sugary, buttery goodness inside, perhaps a pretzel shape or a vanilla ring. But the moment you pry that lid open, your dreams are shattered into a million pieces. Because inside that tin, there are no biscuits. There never were. Instead, there is only a tangled mess of sewing thread, rusty safety pins, old buttons, a thimble, and perhaps a singular, leaking AA battery from 1984. This betrayal, this national deception, dates back to the Victorian era, when metal was expensive and packaging was too good to throw away. But for any child of the 1960s, the crushing disappointment of finding a sewing kit instead of a cookie is a core childhood memory. We didn't throw tins away back then. We reused everything, even if it meant breaking a child's heart. And to this day, reaching for a tin in a British house is a game of Russian roulette, where the bullet is usually a spool of polyester thread. Once you have recovered from the trauma of the sewing tin, it is time to face the Christmas dinner, a meal where we force-feed ourselves festive cheer until we can physically move no more. The ceremony begins with the Christmas cracker. This is a tube of cardboard that starts with a bang and ends in profound disappointment. The history is actually quite fascinating. It was invented in 1847 by a London sweetmaker named Tom Smith. He had been to Paris, seen bonbons wrapped in paper, and thought, I should bring this to Britain. But the idea flopped. Then, one night, sitting by his log fire, listening to the wood crackle and pop, he had a sudden epiphany. What if I put a small amount of gunpowder in the wrapper so it explodes when you pull it? And thus, a tradition was born. Today, you could buy the most expensive, luxury crackers from Harrods or Fortnum and Mason, but the result is always the same. You pull it with the person next to you, there is the acrid smell of gunpowder, and out falls a piece of plastic tat, usually a tiny comb, a red plastic fish that curls up in your hand to tell your fortune, or a miniature screwdriver set that fits nothing. Alongside the rubbish gift is a joke so unfunny it makes you want to weep, usually involving penguins or elves. But the most important component is the paper hat. Picture the scene: a serious businessman, or the family patriarch, dressed in his finest suit, sitting at the head of the table wearing a neon pink tissue paper crown that keeps slipping over one eye. We all look ridiculous. We know we look ridiculous, but we do it anyway. Because if you take that hat off before the pudding is served, you have effectively ruined Christmas. It is the one rule that keeps our British Reserve in check. You cannot take yourself seriously when you are wearing a piece of coloured tissue paper on your head. Hat secured, cracker pulled, we move on to the food. With Christmas just 2 days away, I have to ask, have you finished your preparations yet? And do you still follow all these quirky traditions at your house? Let me know in the comments below. The turkey is standard fare, but the British Christmas dinner features a vegetable that is universally reviled by the rest of the human race. The Brussels sprout. These are small green spheres that taste of obligation and sadness. Surveys consistently show that over 50% of the British public absolutely detest them. Children look at them with genuine fear, often trying to hide them under their mash or feed them to the dog when mum isn't looking. And yet, every December, we collectively purchase 7,000 tons of the things. Why? The reason, again, is history. In the harsh winters of the early 1960s, before global shipping lanes and supermarkets brought us avocados in January, sprouts were practically the only thing that would grow in the freezing British soil. It was a vegetable of necessity, but being British, we took our 60s austerity and turned it into a tradition. Today, we boil them. We boil them until they turn a depressing shade of grey and emit a smell not unlike old gym socks. Some people try to jazz them up with bacon or chestnuts, but you cannot hide the truth. They are bitter, they are mushy, but they must be on the plate. Without them, it just wouldn't be Christmas. And when you have managed to choke down the sprouts, it is time for dessert. And this is where we prove to the world that we are actually quite dangerous. In other countries, they might put a candle on a cake. In Britain, we douse our cake in high-proof brandy and set it on fire. I am talking, of course, about the Christmas pudding. It is a black, dense, heavy cannonball of a dessert made of dried fruit, spices, and suet. It dates back to medieval times, originally made with 13 ingredients to represent Jesus and his disciples. But today, the primary purpose of the pudding is to see if Dad can light it up without setting the curtains on fire. Imagine the scene. The lights go off, and a blue-flamed meteorite is carried into the dining room. Everyone claps and oohs and ahs, despite the fact that nobody actually has room in their stomach to eat it. It is incredibly rich, incredibly heavy, and often ends up sitting in the fridge until March. And of course, there is a hidden danger inside. Traditionally, a silver sixpence was baked into the mix. Whoever found the coin was said to have good luck for the year. In reality, they usually just had a cracked molar and an emergency trip to the dentist. After the meal, when everyone is so full they can barely breathe, a hush descends over the nation. It is 3 p.m. It is time for the King's speech. This tradition started in 1932 with George V on the radio. Back in the 1960s, when there were only 2 or 3 channels on the television, watching the Queen's speech wasn't a choice. It was mandatory. The whole family would gather around the small black and white set in silence, standing for the national anthem at the end. Today, the scene is slightly different. Today, the King's speech is the designated time for the national nap. Half the family is passed out on the sofa, Granddad is snoring with his mouth open, and the teenagers are doom-scrolling on their phones. But the TV must be on. The King must be speaking. If anyone dares to reach for the remote to change the channel, Nan will look at them with a gaze so withering it feels like they have committed high treason. It is a 10-minute broadcast where the monarch tells us how the year has gone, and while most of us won't remember a single word he said 5 minutes later, we watch it because it is what we do. As evening draws in, we bring out the mince pies. Now the name is misleading. It sounds like they should contain minced beef, and historically, in Tudor times, they actually did. But thankfully, Modern mince pies contain only spiced fruit and sweet. However, we have attached a bizarre superstition to them. It is said that for the 12 days of Christmas, you must eat one mince pie every single day to ensure good luck for the coming year. Considering we have already eaten 3 times our body weight in turkey, forcing down a pastry case filled with spiced raisins becomes a chore rather than a treat. And the crowning glory? We leave one out for Father Christmas, usually accompanied by a glass of brandy or sherry, because obviously drinking and driving a sleigh is perfectly acceptable in British folklore. But the madness doesn't stop there. Amidst all this, there is one final tradition that is uniquely, bafflingly British: the pantomime. Trying to explain a panto to a foreigner is impossible. It is a theatre show for children, usually based on a fairy tale like Cinderella or Aladdin, but completely butchered. The leading older woman, the dame, is played by a middle-aged man in drag with terrible makeup. The leading principal boy is often played by a young woman in tights. For anyone growing up in the 1960s, a trip to the local theatre to shout at men in wigs was the absolute highlight of the festive season. Finally, the long day ends. We sleep. But the story doesn't end there, because the next morning, while the rest of the world is getting ready to go back to work, Britain celebrates a second holiday: Boxing Day. Americans are often baffled by this. Do we box? Are there pugilistic matches? No. The name comes from the Christmas box. In the Victorian era, the wealthy would give their servants the 26th of December off, sending them home with a box containing leftover food and small gifts. It is the day you are legally entitled to lie on the sofa, watching football or a film you've seen 1,000 times, eating leftovers and chocolates for breakfast. There is no pressure to cook, no pressure to be polite to relatives. It is pure bliss. Ultimately, what binds all these traditions together, the disappointment of the sewing tin, the agony of the sprouts, the danger of the flaming pudding, is our national character. We know our Christmas is chaotic. We know we look silly in paper hats. But that is the point. These strange rituals are the glue that holds us together. They remind us of simpler times, of those classic 1960s Christmases where we made do with what we had. They remind us that we are a nation that can laugh at itself, a nation that celebrates its history, and a nation that, even in the depths of a dark, cold winter, will find a reason to set a dessert on fire and cheer. So, if you are celebrating a British Christmas this year, remember, if the turkey is dry, if the gift is rubbish, or if your paper hat rips immediately, don't worry. That just means you're doing it exactly right.